is much smaller than a standard device. So that's it for the demo. Now the next question most people ask is, wow, it looks great. How much does it cost? And here you can see it retails for $3,500. And what device does it work on? We've tested the mobile module to work on all iOS devices, so that's iPhone, iPod, and iPad, and Android devices running Android 2.2 or later. So, you know, the Droid X or Droid 2 are examples of devices like that. And we expect to shortly certify BlackBerry version 6 or later. Essentially, any device that has a modern web browser that supports JavaScript and the HTML canvas element should work just fine. But the devices you see listed here are the ones that we've actually verified to work. And with that, I'm going to hand it back to Don.
Carl, thanks a lot. It was great. I really appreciate it. Before I actually turn it over to Tom Heckman to talk about OEE downtime and scheduling, I just want to take a couple of minutes and talk about MES. I'm sure you're very familiar with MES, but just to ensure that we have sort of a backdrop of where MES fits and why we think it's such an important component as we expand the original vision of inductive automation in the Ignition platform was to build something that could really connect the enterprise. You hear a lot written and talked about manufacturing 2.0. Well, we realized that in order to do that, you have to really glue together the entire enterprise from the sort of transaction-based back-end stuff to the plant floor and the process controls that go on there in more real time. MES is actually stands for Manufacturing Execution System, and it was first used by AMR Research, which is now part of Gartner back in '92. And the idea was that manufacturing was being reduced to a 3-layer model focused on a need to link the planning process actually to the control process. So you had planning, which is ERP and the business systems. You had the execution of that, the MES layer in the middle. Then you had the control systems, including all the operator interfaces. And MES, really, all MES setups have a much shorter transaction time frame. They measure in hours, minutes, seconds, sub-seconds. So MES must be designed for a continuous availability. And it was first deployed to bridge that gap between transaction-oriented business systems and real-time production operation decisions. So it really brings to manufacturing operations the efficiencies and the data analytics, if you will, that ERP brought to financial systems. MES actually lives between those business systems, such as the ERP, and they're used to run the enterprise, and the control equipment on the plant floor performing functions that include but aren't limited to some of what I listed here. You know, your scheduling, collecting production information, quality control, efficiency, product traceability, any historical monitoring or changeover management. So what we really have with MES is you have a typical scenario. You have the financial forecasting, inventory, procurement, all those ERP-type business processes. Then you have the plant floor, and that's the machine control, the process control, and your operator interface. So really, in a perfect world, you know, I guess you'd say for decades there's been a division between sort of the plant floor and the IT department and the people who ran the other parts of the enterprise. And in an ideal scenario, you just put MES right in the middle, which is your production scheduling, recipe, changeover management, OEE downtime, preventive maintenance, track and trace, all of those functions that you need to really connect what you're producing to the running of that in the business sense. And so when you think about that, it certainly makes sense in terms of the theory, but boy, has there been a whole variety of attempts to try and do that over the previous years that haven't really effectively melded them together in an effective way. There have been a lot of challenges to the implementation of MES systems. They're in high demand, but not a really great success rate. Management on the top end is certainly pushing for more information. They want to know the efficiency, about downtime. They want to control and understand production better. And ERP software has included limited MES functionality, trying to go from the top down. When we looked at it and started approaching it from the viewpoint of HMI, SCADA, growing up, using modern technology that actually brings IT into the solution with the plant floor and connecting it to all the databases that are involved with the enterprise, it really turned into a very good model for putting it all together and avoid this problem of data being isolated and not being able to be shared. Another one of the areas of challenges is just hard to implement manually. It takes a long time. Troubleshooting is actually very, very risky. And I'm sure as many of you know, if you're relying on just a few select people who built the application, maybe they're on vacation, busy on another project, they're no longer available, and I'm telling you that can actually put a tremendous amount of risk in there that really jeopardizes the project success rate. And data becomes too old. And I can't overemphasize this last one. The prices and the pricing and licensing hassles just simply prohibit moving forward with any kind of confidence that you're not going to end up with some backward compatibility problem or some change in a version, and all of a sudden another $500,000 gets burned trying to get the system working again. So if you think about that, just one emphasis on that point, because cost is a major impediment here. This was just came out. Managing Automation does an MES buyer's guide every year. In the 2010 one, this was a quote from a gentleman named Simon Jacobson, who's with AMR. He said a new MES costs from 150 to 300 grand for the software license, plus 1.5 to 3 times that amount for services. So frankly, what you're looking at is somewhere in the neighborhood of $375,000 to $1 million to get something going. And we really felt that as you look at this particular area, we have a licensing model that actually encourages expansion of clients, expansion of tags, no limit in terms of no hassle on that. So the creativity which MES can unleash is facilitated by a licensing model that's consistent with that. So just what if? You could envision a world where preventive maintenance systems schedule maintenance based on the runtime or cycle count of a machine instead of calendar. You can compare machine efficiency to maintenance cycles. Production, maintenance, warehouse, and management departments are all coordinated by a shared schedule. You see efficiencies of quality or quality information based on raw material vendors, operator, maintenance staff, and more, and a recipe management system that you can see efficiencies and quality information by machine or process setting. So with that vision in mind, I actually want to turn it over to Tom Heckman, who's been developing the MES modules, and let him give you a demo and hear from some other folks who have been involved in the evolution. With that, Tom Heckman, over to you.
Thank you, Don. Now, we looked at the requirements of what we wanted for our MES system, our modules that we're coming out with. And I just want to review through those real quickly here. We wanted it to be built on Ignition because Ignition brings so many things to the picture, and Don covered a lot of those. But, you know, communicating with the plant floor, connecting to databases, that's already taken care of. Allows you to design screens and reports. It provides access for users to use one program, which is important. It's easy to deploy. Mobile support and a lot more. You know, what's typical is you have a separate program, maybe one that does quality assurance, you have a different one that does preventive maintenance, and then efficiency may be a different one yet. And with the data all separate, you can't see correlations between the two. So by being built on Ignition, you'll be able to share that data, and the modules, that's just a must, that they be able to interact with each other. You know, you can have preventive maintenance. If you analyze preventive maintenance cycles to efficiency, because you have those two modules that can interact with together. You may notice a maintenance cycle is every 400 hours, but the last 75 hours of that, your efficiencies start going down. You know, you might want to change your maintenance cycle and improve that efficiency. And that's really hard to be able to detect when you don't have the proper tools in place. Another requirement was that we have one location to configure. I didn't want to go into separate programs and set up a production model for preventive maintenance in program X, and in program Y, we set up the efficiency and downtime. We just wanted to do it in one spot. Ignition provides that. And it needed to be simple. It needed to take care of a lot of the tasks. You know, it didn't want users to have to go in there and create SQL statements or figure out database schemas, minimal script. We want to be able to get up to speed fast and then still be modifiable, as each facility has their own processes and requirements. We wanted it to be able to handle accommodating those. And then the licensing. Don hit on this very well, and it's very, very important, is that, too many times I've seen where they only have 2 terminals installed because the licensing is so expensive. And because it's on Ignition, and it's also a requirement of these modules, that there's not a limit of how many clients access it. And it's not a limit of how many tags you can access or how many cells in your production model that you can have. So that was a requirement. So we felt we've hit all those requirements here with our module. So we're developing a suite of modules, and the first was the OEE downtime and scheduling module. It's currently in beta. We're targeted to release in February of 2011. And we'll first talk about a little bit about OEE. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this, but typically if you kept track of your machine efficiency just by the runtime, well, if the machine's running half the rate that it normally does, that's really not that efficient. So OEE takes into account your scheduled availability for it, your production rate that you're running, and quality. If half your product is bad, then your efficiencies go down. I think there was a recent story about $100 bills that a billion of them were produced, and they didn't meet quality, and so now their efficiency isn't very good, and we probably all have stories like that. The other thing is TEDP, which that is more of an asset utilization. You take a look at your machine as an asset out there. It's available 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. How's the utilization of that? Downtime comes into play to close the loop and make improvements on your process. So it's tracking the reasons you're not as efficient, and then you can take action against those reasons and improve your efficiency. And you kind of have to think, if you can improve your efficiency by 1%, what does that do for your manufacturing facility's bottom line? A small improvement in efficiency can make a huge difference. All right, now we're going to go to a demo. I'm going to break the demo up into 2 parts. The first part is going to cover the user screens, and some of the highlights in there. And then I'm going to go into what it takes to actually configure the system. Okay. Built into this is scheduling, and we also have work orders as well. The work orders, in some cases, might come from the ERP system. In other cases, they might be manually entered, and we can handle them both ways. But just quickly viewing here, some highlights is you can see the quantity column. That's how many you need to produce. The schedule is how many have been scheduled, and the produce column will show you how many have been produced, and then the remaining. Different product codes. This is where you select your product code, what lines you can run it on. It's very easy just to change. You can add new product codes here. You can also pick them up from the ERP system as well. Also, this is where all your various settings for that product code can be changed. What pieces of equipment needed to be run for that product, what the production rates are, the package count, information like that. So once you have the work order in the product code, then you can schedule runs. That's pretty straightforward. It's almost like using Outlook. We have different types of items that you can schedule. But you can select a